This is an overview video for Caustic 3. Caustic is a rack mount simulation that uses synthesizers and samplers to create sequenced music. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look around, see what everything does, and then create a small song to get an idea of how you do that. If you've already used music software before, a lot of these concepts will be very familiar. But if you've never used one before, Caustic's actually a great place to start because a lot of the concepts are simplified down to their bare elements. So this is the view from within the app. This is where your machines will go, and by scrolling the rack edge, you can scroll between machines. So this is your effects rack, the mixer, the master section, and the song sequencer where we're going to be putting together our song. Down at the bottom here, the bit that doesn't move, is the control panel, also known as transport in a lot of apps. This is where you've got your standard play, stop, record. There's a metronome you can use for recording. And right now you'll notice the metronome button's got a little triangle notch on the side. One thing to know in Caustic is any button with a triangle notch means you can long press the button and there's an extra action associated with that. So if I just trigger the metronome and hit play, I just get a normal metronome. And if I long press the metronome button, we get a volume adjustment for it. So in this case, it's just an extra parameter. Here's the pattern song switch to select between the modes, and I'll explain that in a bit. An information panel here showing various indicators and time and the name of your track. The menu button from which you're going to get all your operations, file operations, and your options. And over here is the machine management screen. This is where you can add machines, move machines, replace machines, and delete machines. You get 14 instrument slots in which you can add machines. Now, depending on your hardware and the machines you use, you might not be able to run up to 14 machines at once. One thing to note is the little VU meter here is a CPU usage meter. So if that goes in the red, you'll be running into underruns and it might crackle. So keep an eye on that and understand that 14 machines is a maximum. It doesn't mean your device can necessarily run that. Another thing we can use the machine management screen is to jump around between machines. If you've got a lot of machines placed, scrolling with the rack might be a bit tedious to get from one end to the other. So you can simply just tap on a machine that you want to jump from one end to the other really quickly. To move, replace, or delete a machine, drag it onto the square if you want to just move it, onto replace if you want to change it with another machine, or onto the delete area if you want to remove it. So let's get started right away, and we'll add a new machine. And we'll start with probably the simplest machine to start with, which is the beatbox. It's a simple sampling drum machine. There's a video tutorial that explains all the specifics of the channels and how the knobs work. But for now, I'm just going to select a kit. And that loads up my 8 channels, various sounds. So one thing that's new in Caustic 3 is if you want to preview different kits or presets, you can select the preset selector and then swipe left or right, and that'll just change between the entries that were in that directory. So you can quickly switch between one preset and another if you're just trying to find a sound. So if we scroll down one step here, we'll get to the machine's pattern editor. The pattern editors are where we're going to be composing our patterns, and patterns are the basic building blocks that we use to make our song. Now each machine can have 64 patterns, so 4 pattern banks of 16 patterns each. By default, a pattern is 1 measure long, so if we hit play on this in pattern mode, we'll see the playback cursor looping around on this 1 measure. If we place a note trigger inside one of the grid squares, that will trigger our sample to play in this case. By default, all patterns are 1 measure in length, but we can extend that using the grid selector and select 2 measures, 4 measures, or up to 8 measures. So let's say we wanted to make a 4 measure pattern here. So now our pattern extends to 4 measures. If we want to shrink it back down to, let's say 2, you'll notice 2 and 1 have a long press corner here. So if we long press on this 2, it'll shrink it back down to 2 measures. I'll set my grid back to 16th notes, and I'll set up an example beat. I'll just take this one away for now. And so in here is where you place your note triggers, and each note trigger for the beatbox will trigger a separate channel on the samples that are loaded. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a really simple beat here, kind of a dubstep thing. If we want to set the tempo, use the menu into the song and set the tempo. In this case, I'll set it to 138. You can adjust the velocity of a note trigger, and in most cases that translates to a volume change. So you can select it and then use the velocity slider. So let's say this one I want it to set to 100%. So that one's a bit louder. If I want to copy paste this section into the next one, I can go into the selection. So we were in note parameter mode here, and we'll go to selection mode, and there you can either do a select all. If you've got already one note selected, you can press multi and then do kind of a sparse selection. And then pressing select none, of course, will remove the selection. You can do a lasso selection around just a few. Or you can also do time selection, and this selects everything within the selected time. So if you're looking at a piano instrument with notes up top and at the bottom, it selects everything within that time. So for now, I'm just going to select everything in here. Now go to the clipboard operations, copy, and there's a little paste cursor that appeared here automatically to paste starting from here. If you want to start from somewhere else, you can drag this around, but right now the automatic adjustment tells me I want to place it here, so I'll just press paste, and now I've got a second copy of the same thing. If you want finer note resolution than 16th notes, you can press the grid and go into one of the smaller resolutions. So if I go into 30-second notes here, it's now zoomed in on my pattern, and I can place smaller increments. If you want to not have it quantized to the grid, in here you can turn off quantization, and then you can just place your note wherever you want, and if you want a more natural feel. To quickly delete a note, you can just double tap it. And if a note is already selected and it's not quite quantized and you want to quantize it, just make sure it's selected, then press quantize, and that'll snap it to the nearest place. In this case, I'm just going to put a couple little extra 30-second note triggers here just to show you, and maybe just a ramp up in volume, just to show you can do a lot more precision than just 16th notes. I'll zoom back out to 16th. Okay, so let's call that pattern done for now, and let's move on to another instrument. Go to Machine Management and tap on Square 2 and add a subsynth. Same thing, I'm not going to explain the subsynth, there's a video on that, but I'm just going to select a preset. To select the preset, either press load or double tap on the name. If you want to manage your presets or any file that are in this file management screen, you can long press the name of it, and from there you can create new folders, rename presets or songs, cut, copy, paste, and then delete. For now, I'm just going to select this one. Just a tiny bit. Okay, I'll go down to its pattern editor. Now this one's a piano roll and spans from C1 all the way up to C7. So to drag between them, grab inside the piano and scroll up or down. To place notes, it's the same as the other one, just tap inside. Now for piano notes, the length of the note obviously changes how long the note is held for, so you can adjust the length of these note triggers you've placed by pressing the size button, and then there's a little gripper which you can adjust. One trick though in Caustic 3 is if you want to really quickly just adjust something you've placed, once it's selected, just tap and drag on the button, so no need to press it and then tap on the note itself. Just hold your finger on the size button and then drag around, and then you can quickly just resize your note. So that's a lot quicker when you're placing a bunch of notes to just do that rather than toggle to size mode and then have to drag each one. So I could place notes in here, but rather I'm going to record the notes in here. So depending on your device, and especially Android devices have a lot of latency, live recording from the keyboard or either a MIDI keyboard that's connected is going to have a bit of latency, so you might need to readjust. The quantize will help you, but you might actually need to shuffle notes around if the latency's bad. So to record my notes in the pattern, I'm going to press record and then hit play. Actually, I'm going to make this one 2 bars as well, or maybe 4. And now I can record on this. So now that's playing back what's been recorded. If we go down here, we'll see the notes that we've been recorded. So I'll just readjust these a little bit. So you get 2 options. You can place your notes down if you prefer to sequence the notes yourself, or you can record if you've got a MIDI keyboard or you want to use the preview keyboard to record. But remember that latency might come into effect and you'll have to shuffle things around. All right, so we've got one pattern in each of these instruments. Maybe I'll go ahead and create another pattern on the beatbox. So I'll select A2, and you'll notice the A1, the 1 is actually kind of highlighted compared to the 2. The 2 is a bit transparent. So that means there's nothing recorded in, obviously, any of these patterns. So a pattern that's got something recorded will show a darker number. I'll just record something really quickly in pattern A2, and that'll give us something to work with in the sequencer. So if I jump down to the sequencer now, you'll see the 2 machines I've placed and the timeline of our song. So to create our song, I'm going to be sequencing or lining up a bunch of patterns that we've created. So let's say to start, I want to create a pattern on the beatbox and use pattern A2 that I've just created. Now, same as in the piano roll, you can stretch your patterns to span a longer time if you want. So in this case, my A2 only spanned 1 measure, and then if I wanted to have it span 4 measures, I can tap and drag the button and stretch it out to 4. So that'll be kind of the intro to my song, and then at measure 4, I'll have pattern A1 start, and you can see A1 was 2 measures, so it automatically spans the 2 measures. Let's say I wanted to have it span 4. Can do that. And then at the same time, I'll start my pattern A1 that I had created on the subsynth. So if I set it to song mode now, and so this will actually play from the sequencer rather than the actual pattern editors that we had up top. If I press play now, and so that stopped automatically because that was the end of our song. If we wanted to listen to a piece of our song in a loop, we can set up a loop in the timeline. To do so, tap and drag inside the timeline area and drag from left to right. That will set where your loop cursors go. So now if we tap once inside the timeline, we can set where the playback cursor starts. So now that'll loop until we press stop. If you've already got things set up and you kind of want to insert another section into your song, well, first, to remove a loop, drag inside the timeline from right to left this time, and that'll kind of set the cursors to the same spot. So if you set the loop cursors to the same place, that removes the loop. So if we wanted to insert a few measures here at time 4, what we can do is long press inside the timeline at measure 4, and then it'll offer to insert a few measures. So let's say we wanted to insert another 2, we could do that. If you want to remove something that's already set up, you can create a loop selection and then press inside the loop, long press, and then that'll offer to trim those measures. So that'll remove everything, patterns, anything you've got recorded, automation, and you go back to where it was before. Let's just set up our loop again, and we'll have a look at the other parts of the app. Up here are the effects. So you can insert up to 2 effects per instrument, And so to do so, press inside one of the squares. So these are the two inserts for the beatbox, and these are the two for the subsynth. On the beatbox, say I want to add a compressor, just to tighten up the punch. And on the subsynth, say I wanted to add another one, I'll add a bit crusher to make it a bit dirtier. If you want to do A/B testing on your effects to hear what it sounds like with and without, you can tap inside the title of the effect, and that'll toggle the bypass. So when the LED's on, the effect is on, and when it's off, it's bypassed. Okay, let's go down to the mixer. So each instrument gets a line in the mixer, and you can see a label here showing which instrument is set up. If you want to jump to the instrument, you can double tap on the label, and that'll bring you to the machine. Now you'll notice this beatbox is just called beatbox, and the subsynth is just called subsynth. If you want to rename your machines to something that makes a little more sense to you, especially if you've got two of the same kind of machine in your rack, you can long press on the name of the machine, and then that'll offer to rename it. So in this case, I wanted to call it my main drums. So that name now appears anywhere in the where the labels are used for that machine, and as well as in the sequencer. Okay, let's just run through the controls of the main mixer, and I'll show you what they do. First up is solo and mute. So solo just listens to the instrument that's soloed and mutes out all the other ones. Mute does the opposite. It silences that instrument and lets you hear all the other ones. Volume adjustment for adjusting your instruments in the mix. To reset a control to its default position, just double tap it. Up here is an EQ section. So your standard bass, mid, and high. There are two global effects which every line in the mixer can send to, and that's a delay and a reverb. To send, we adjust the amount using this knob, and to configure the delay and reverb, they're present here in the master section. So for now, we're just going to adjust the amount. So delay, reverb. Panning control, so left, right, pan. And width. Now width just adds a tiny bit of delay to simulate that the sound doesn't come from a point source in front of you, and kind of simulates that it comes from a wider source. So whether you go left or right on the width knob changes which side is slightly delayed. So it's the same controls for each of the channels. So as you're adjusting, if you're adjusting your mix, what you do is normally is you solo your channel and then adjust each of the knobs for the line you're processing. So I'll just go through really quickly and just put some effects on these. Okay, so let's say that was our song and we wanted to export that. So obviously the first thing to do is save. So if you press menu, then save, and I'll save it to, let's give it a name, press save. And now from the song menu, I can press export. And then you can choose either A WAV file, OGG Vorbis, or MIDI file is if all you're after is the note information to transfer into another PC DAW or something. You can either export the song or just the loop, the region that we've got looped. So in this case, let's export the entire song. And so once exported, your song is on your device. Now I've skipped over the master section and I won't explain the reverb and delay effects. There's another tutorial about effects themselves and I'll go more into detail on these two. There's also two insert effect slots which will apply to the global mix, and an equalizer where you can set up your EQ for the mix itself, and a limiter to stop peaks from getting through to the end. You can configure this as a normal limiter effect. Again, it'll be explained in the effects video. Down here is the master volume, so this is your stereo output volume for the whole thing. So keep an eye on the VU meters, make sure you're not clipping. And that's pretty much it. That's the really, really basic steps to creating a song in Caustic. So have a look at the other videos if you want to learn about the machines and effects. And there's more advanced things like automation that you can learn by the other videos. And so once you start adding in new machines and new techniques, you can get a lot more advanced things going on. But the key is you can work your way up and just add things as you learn them. So that's it. Have a go in Caustic.